Okay, so our first question is, how did you become interested in your current position?
Thanks so much for having me. And I've spent so many hours in that classroom. So it's weird to see it from this angle, from like above, which is kind of cool. But I am the Director of Advocacy at United Way of Greenville County. I have only been in this role since November 1st. And previously I had the same title for United Way of the Piedmont, which is in Spartanburg. So I knew that nonprofits would be in my future, just with a background and an interest in social justice work and organizing. I have a passion for grassroots and connecting with community, and being able to be the bridge between community and the legislative process is a newer space for nonprofits, especially United Way. But I was drawn to the organization because it has a national framework, which offers some structure and great support in terms of resources and potential job paths. It will not be the organization I'm with forever, but for now it's a good fit. And I'm happy to pass it on to another panelist.
All right, I'll go. So I started my job at the end of August, taking the bar, and graduated in last May. And I kind of became interested in this because throughout law school, I feel like I spent a lot of time figuring out what I didn't want to do more so than what I did. So I've worked at small firms, worked at large firms, and really kind of found my interest laid in the public sector. And that was kind of solidified through my experience at the DOJ. And then I've spent, starting in my role, it's extremely multifaceted. You get exposed to a lot of different types of law, and it's a lot more hands-on. So you learn, you get thrown in the deep, and you have to learn a lot very, very quickly, which I've really, really appreciated. And yeah, I definitely don't think it'll be a forever job, obviously with political turnover and whatnot as well, but it's definitely a great start, and it's something I've really enjoyed.
So I got my start by kind of being involved in campaigns and such in high school and tangentially throughout college, and then studied abroad, did the Brussels trip with Dr. Nelson, interned in European Parliament, and got to see the policy side of it. And that kind of opened up doors, then decided, made it my goal summer of my junior year, going into my senior year, to intern in Congress. And that opened up all the doors, and fell in love with what I did and the atmosphere and the meaningfulness behind the work. And after a year in Raleigh doing SEC back office compliance, it was fun, but I still had the bug in me to come to DC. So I came to DC, and it's been up from there.
I'm currently in law school, so there's only so much I can speak to about the professional side of things, but I would say I've always had an interest in the law since I've been young. So whenever I finally got to Furman, it was my opportunity to explore different things. And I tried politics. I've always had an interest in the world and problem solving. So that was something that just naturally spoke to me. And I took, this is liberal arts education. So I explored things, and I got interested in philosophy. And I was like, well, what can I do with both of these things together? You're interested in being an attorney. So how would it work out? And I happened to do a Google search, actually. And I looked up top professions for philosophy and politics majors. And lawyer was the top thing. So I was like, well, look at that. It's just perfect. It worked out. It'd be great. So I spent a lot of time at Furman as involved in the NAACP and the Student Diversity Council, and did a lot of social justice and advocacy work while I was there. And I thought that was very meaningful work. And that's something I definitely want to continue to do in the future in terms of working with the community. But after the college, I had the opportunity to work at Kilpatrick Townsend Stockton. I was a trademark analyst doing intellectual property litigation. So we basically just worked on trademark infringement, and my attorney, her name was Lauren Brenner, and she worked in the EU. So we did international trademark dispute, and I felt like that was very interesting work. And that ultimately just solidified in me the decisions to go to law school. And I'm hoping to, work in the corporate sector at a big law firm. I have a few interviews this week, and we will see how that goes. So I just want to continue that work, maybe do some pro bono work, get out there and really do some things for the community.
Well, first off, good luck with me. That's big news. So best of luck with that. And I think another question that we're wondering, and I think that's on the minds of students a lot, is how you've connected your experiences at Furman and your major specifically to tangible opportunities in the workforce. I know Puneet said you're in law school, but if there's a way for you to be able to connect how Furman's prepared you.
No, that is honestly my political science environment, real research and doing those types of things, what you do inside of the Politics and International Affairs Department has been very beneficial. I actually took a constitutional law, well, civil rights in the American Constitution class with Professor Cosby. And I took judicial processes with Professor Arciniega. I know she's not there anymore. And those classes were definitely very helpful with teaching me how to breathe, how to be able to read a case, and then I would say the philosophy side of things, that really taught me how to be able to identify arguments. So if you're a person who likes to read philosophy and read those long arguments and just you have a good understanding of those things, I think that'll translate very well in law school where you're doing over 100 pages of reading a week. So, that's something to look forward to. But I would say that background really helped me get a better understanding of the law and have a better idea of how to make those arguments that you need to be able to make to make a successful legal career.
I'll piggyback off of that while we're talking about law. Definitely a big influence for me was my professors. I also took a class with Professor Cosby, who was super, super helpful with even just meeting with her, after class and talking about, what it's like actually like, what's law school like, what's that transition like into being an attorney, which was really, really helpful and informative. But also taking professors that classes that really challenged me, like Dr. Nelson, Dr. Bressler, constantly like critiquing my writing and making, really, really refining your writing style because Kwame knows it becomes essential once you get into law school. And also just from the econ side as well, like the logical approach to a lot of that was extremely, extremely helpful when you go into a law school and it's, about discerning what is, what the rule is, what the facts are, what are the irrelevant facts, and just learning how to do that quickly, efficiently was really, really helpful, going into law school and now into my career.
I could jump in. I'm thinking back to a comment I will never forget from Dr. Hava Neubauer. As I wrote an essay, it was what I used to call a one-night wonder, where I just cranked it out the night before. And he, as some of you know all too well, I will never forget this comment. He wrote, "Emily, comma, this is a well-written essay with a profound lack of analysis." And I've taken that with me. I have never forgotten that. I cranked this paper out. It was well written, but did I go deeper? No. And so now I always think about that in writing, whether Furman had a lot of long-term academic papers. Now the most of my writing is translating very complex laws into a one-pager or a graphic that any community member with an 8th grade education could understand. And so that takes a lot of skill to be able to translate very nuanced and academic language into something that is easily digestible. And that takes a lot of analysis. So I've gone from a profound lack of analysis and kind of grown this writing, which served me well in grad school. I remember not being fazed by the assignments that I had at Georgetown, and some of my peers had never written a paper longer than 5 pages. And I'm like, I could crank a 20-pager out in 2 days. I don't recommend doing that, but I used to. And so I just think Furman prepared me well for the writing, for the analysis, and for recognizing how to translate documents as well to something that the public can understand.
Yeah, and I'll add on to what Emily said. I mean, Dr. Nelson, Dr. Cal, HN, all of them, they make you learn all this information forwards and backwards and learn how to apply it. So going through, like Emily said, trying to identify laws, you're also looking for a fix in what I do. So if there's a law that there's an issue with how it was drafted, or you're trying to identify how is an amendment going to affect the law when it's being voted on before you're sending vote recs. It's important to be able to quickly absorb information and then figure out how what you just learned applied. But I'll also say the extracurricular experiences. I mean, the MAX, I did the Farm MAX with HN, studied abroad with Nelson. All of those are invaluable, seeing things firsthand in action and being able to draw on those in my job and in the interview process, being able to explain how I've seen something and that's why I'm interested. I think all that definitely played a role.
Thank you, guys. The next question kind of is more about more community work and more advocacy work. And Emily, you may be able to answer this a little bit more depth, more. But kind of what advice do you have for current Furman students who are looking to intentionally contribute towards the common good? And in their work and in the political sphere.
I would say that advocacy happens wherever you are, wherever you happen to be. You advocate for yourself in a lot of ways every day. You advocate with your classmates. If you're part of a student organization, you're advocating for the interests of that group. My advocacy journey really started on campus with sexual assault prevention and organizing on Title IX. And I think at the time, then I was what I would call an activist. I was all there for the rallies. I was organizing rallies and protests on campus. I was trying to shake up Furman's politeness and really challenge people to address some of the issues that I was seeing on campus. Now, in my role, I still support those causes, but I'm very much an advocate, which is more behind the scenes, thinking about strategy, thinking about bringing people in coalition, no longer the face of an issue. When activism is very visible, advocacy is sometimes in closed doors. And so if that's something that interests you, we need both. We need the people on the front lines, and we need people working behind doors with legislators and with people like Rob, and both are really important, right, to change policy. So whether you're involved in a student org or not, whether you're involved with the Center for Inclusive Communities or not, those are great places to start. There are some great organizations in South Carolina that are issue-based, that are also doing advocacy. You can start to kind of follow those organizations. A couple that come to mind are ACLU. If you're interested in something I'm working on with them, is tenant right to counsel. So folks being evicted in South Carolina right now go through civil court, and they do not have the right to a lawyer to represent them. And when we can have folks with legal representation in the eviction process, they stay housed. So ACLU is known for a lot of the more progressive issues, but they're also focusing on housing and stability in that sense. If you're interested in gender justice or reproductive rights, WREN, the Women's Rights Empowerment Network, you must know about in South Carolina. They're holding the line. And those are two that I follow very closely. And I'd be happy to share more on the local level as well. But thinking about how to get involved in campus, you have so many opportunities through student orgs, through grassroots happening in Greenville or in the state, following them on Twitter, X, or social media. Getting to know what the landscape is really important to inform. And the last thing I would say is you don't have to go at any of this alone. It actually doesn't work to go at advocacy by yourself. Coalition, whether that's with peers or with folks who are doing the work already in the community, is the way to go.
I'd like to second a lot of what Emily has already said. It was very helpful for me to just have a start in the community, getting involved with CIC, getting involved in NAACP, doing those things and really reaching out to those people who are already involved in those things. And I think once you find something you're passionate about, everything just flows from there. You have a passion for this thing, you meet other people who are passionate about this thing, and you come together and it just blossoms. It grows into something that you couldn't even imagine that it would ever be. So just definitely putting yourself out there, finding something you're passionate about and something that you really want to, make a difference in. I think that's one of the most valuable pieces of advice that I think Emily has said. Just really focus on something you're passionate about and network with other people who are interested in what you're interested in, and it'll just grow from there. And I can also speak about this from like a law school perspective, because we actually have a pro bono clinic here. So here we have different projects throughout the semester at Wake Forest. Currently now we're actually doing an expungement clinic. So we're helping people, be able to get certain crimes, misdemeanors expunged off of their records, to be able to help them with their employment and things of that nature. We've had an immigration clinic where people are helping, file paperwork for immigrants who are trying to come into the country. And there's so many different things that you can do inside the field of law to really just be able to help with people. And like Emily said, just be an advocate. You don't necessarily have to be the face of an organization to still be able to help people. And I think that's something that I've learned, more in law school, being that advocate, being able to help other people from the background and the sidelines versus just being that face. And I think that's also important work that has to be done.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that, just like in the field of law, there are a ton of areas that you can find advocacy for, like, because the law touches everything, absolutely everything. And so whether it is be it doing something like pro bono, where you work at a firm and you have your, corporate practice or whatever, and you do pro bono on the side, you can also, I mean, even depending on where you work, you can go work for a nonprofit, or even doing something as simple, simple is like being a public defender. Like there is advocacy there, and that is, fair, fair play of the law, fair trial. Make sure that your clients get rights and everything like that. Like there's plenty of places to do that. And then also like, don't be afraid. Like if you decide to go to school, to just, if there's a gap, like you're passionate about something, you're not seeing it being done, try to start it. Talk to people about getting it started, whether it's a professor, whether it's, somebody in the administration. Just take that first step, and then people will follow. Like, just don't be scared to take the initiative to actually do something, and start the change that you want to see.
Yeah, just find an issue that you're passionate about and learn everything there is to know about it. By no means is every issue I handle my passion project. I have 14 issues I help advise the Congresswoman on, but there's a lot of things that you can do, and you get your foot in the door with one, and you learn to love other ones. There's ones that I handle that I never would have thought that I enjoy, and they've become some of my favorite things to work on. So just keep an open mind, but definitely find what you're passionate about and pursue it.
Thank you, guys. Another thing that I had a question about is, what advice have you guys specifically received that you have found to be particularly helpful, as you moved away from Furman into your particular professions? What kind of things were you told that you found to be true, and that you found to be helpful in the process of your career development?
Need to simmer. I'm going to pass it to another panelist. I got to think about that.
I'll share a piece of advice, and I think especially as Furman students, you should personally be able to identify with this. And the piece of advice I received is you can't do everything. I was so involved at Furman. I was inside. I had 2 jobs. I was the leader of like 3 organizations, and I had all my classes all at the same time. And it was just like a whirlwind of things that I was just doing every day. And I just started to get burned out, and I really felt that, and it was something that made me not want to pursue law school, straight out of college, because I was like, I need a break from everything. But then whenever you even get inside the workforce, you have all these projects coming at you and all these different people who need you, and you have responsibilities, and you have work, and you have school, and you just everything, make a priority list for yourself. Prioritize things, prioritize your mental health, prioritize exercise, prioritize just being able to read a book at night. You have to set those boundaries for yourself, because if you don't, both you and others will walk all over them. So just go ahead and prioritize yourself and set those boundaries within yourself where you say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do any more than this. And just communicate also with your employers and people around you to just let them know, like, okay, well, I can't handle that right now, but if you can give me a few days, I'll be able to work on that. Or if you have multiple people coming at you with things they want you to do, like projects, say, well, I'm working on this project. I don't have the bandwidth to do that right now. Can I refer you to someone else? So really just advocating for yourself and advocating for your mental health is very important as you grow older, I'd say. And I think that saved me a lot in law school as well. Having that experience at Furman definitely made me not get as involved as I was at Furman in law school. So I definitely have a little bit more control over my schedule. I have more peace. I can do my readings and everything that I need to do and still be able to have a break at the end of the day to recharge and, go back at it again hard and strong the next day.
Yeah, going off of that, like really try to like sit and think about like what's like most important to you, and like really what you want your life to look like, what you want your impact to be. And that goes even to like deciding a career. Like if you think about what you want your impact and like work-life balance to look like, and then you can work backwards from that, I think that's sometimes helpful in narrowing down what to and what not to do. And also talk to people. Like don't be afraid to reach out and get like an honest 2 cents of, what you want your life to look like. Because like if you go into law and you decide you don't want to work like a ton of hours, like you're not going to want to do big law, because you're going to have to do a ton of hours. And that's just how it is. And so really try to like be intentional, and don't be afraid to ask questions with what you want, with what you're thinking about. And also it's like okay to not know. Like if you don't know right now what exactly you want to do, like that's fine. And sometimes the process is more figuring out what you don't want to do than what you do want to do. And you can work backwards from that, but it's always somewhere. So I would just say start with doing something and just be really intentional in your steps, and don't be afraid to ask questions or talk to people.
It's going to sound cliche, but just network. I mean, other people have the answers you're looking for. Worst case scenario, you send an email and the person doesn't reply. You're not going to lose anything from it. So feel free. I'm sure everyone on this wants to be helpful. Most people in the firm and network are extremely helpful. Reach out, shoot a cold email, ask them for a phone call, or ask them whatever question you have point blank. People want to help others, and everyone wants to see more firm and alumni wherever they work. So everyone's always happy to help.
Yeah, I would just add, Jackson made a good point. It's okay not to know. And I think along those lines, pivoting is okay too. So I started working at Furman. I worked in higher ed, student programming. That wasn't it for me and needed something else. And I couldn't put my hand on it. So then I went to grad school and really delved further into the systems change. And I found that that is a lane for me. So then I worked at a think tank while I was in DC, and then that was too removed from the systems and policy change. So now I found a better fit in a nonprofit. So I've pivoted from 3 industries so far in my short, I like to think short, but it's getting up there now, career. And I'm also a huge proponent of not rushing into grad school. I think Furman in the Ivory Tower is a great place and produces amazing minds. And that is also really competitive. And I think when you have friends who have a set track, like med school, law school, not to compare yourself with that track, and not to require grad school right away. I think if I had gone straight into grad school as a senior, I would have applied to like an MPA, Masters of Public Administration, or Masters of Public Policy. Had I done that, I would have completely missed out on a brand new program that I ended up in later. So I worked for 2.5 years and then I went to grad school. And by then I had figured out what I didn't want to do. So I pivoted and got a policy degree, but my program did not exist 3 years before when I would have been applying. I was the second cohort of this brand new program. So if you don't know what you want to do, grad school is so expensive. Wait and do something else and figure out if you love it, pursue it. If you don't love it, that's okay, and pivot. But pivoting is okay. And your first couple jobs are not permanent. You're not going to get locked in an industry that you don't like. So those would be my words.
And then, a common theme that we wanted to, to develop with the panel is all of you are quite young. And so I had a question about how are you, as being a part of the younger generation, are you seeing any major differences, in your current industry? And if you are there any things that, we should be wary of, or things that we should, say we should keep doing this? How has that affected the way that you see the particular career path?
Go for that hybrid work. Like, we can demand that. I think with enough of the mass of Gen Z and the millennials, I think hybrid work is here to stay in most industries, obviously not all industries. And if that's something that you're, interested in doing, you can be in the community and be hybrid at the same time. So I think that's changing. I worked at one organization that was anti-hybrid work. They let people go home in the pandemic and immediately brought them back. And my boss was a retired superintendent, super old school. If you're not in the seat, you're not working. And it took us 1.5 years to push back, but we got Fridays remote, which is like a big deal. But now in my new organization, we're much more hybrid. People are flexible. And that honestly attracted me partially to make the switch. So there is some power, even if you're a young alum or a recent grad, and kind of deciding how you want to work. That would be again, not every industry is able to do that. I'm lucky to be in nonprofits. I don't know that big law or teaching or manufacturing is going to be something you can say, yeah, I want, only 3 days a week in office. But if you go down a more flexible path, I think I'm seeing that shift in mindset and leadership as well.
Law is notoriously slow to adapt to basically anything, but they have, off of that, my job allows me to work remote 2 days a week. My boss personally is much more relaxed with that. And most firms, at least the ones I've been at, do allow some form of remote work. Now, I also think if you do decide to go to law, it is extremely important to spend some time in the office and meeting these people, especially these older attorneys. Like you can learn a lot from them, and they're also much more old fashioned, and they can be very helpful to your career. But it's the face time, and it is the getting to meet people. that is extremely, extremely important. And just also, law is a high stress career. Like you're going to have times where you're working long hours, and it's not always going to be fun. But you can meet people, and kind of forming a bond with the people that are in your office, I think is also important, just in that face-to-face contact. But that being said, having, if you need some flexibility, whether it's just, the ability to work remote so you can travel some on the weekends, even just to see family, I think that is important. And most firms and places of work are more willing to do that. With law, other changes in law, it's pretty slow. Like, I mean, it's in a lot of ways the same. The only thing that I've seen is potential, like, the impact of AI in law will be interesting when it comes to legal research. It could cut down on some like paralegal positions, or even like first year associate positions at larger firms, because a lot of that groundwork that is normally relegated down to the lower levels could be cut out because of AI. That would be the only thing that is potentially, and that's probably a few years in the future before that ever becomes like an impact, but that is the only thing on the horizon that may be disruptive in the market that I can think of.
I would say something that I've noticed has definitely been the shift pretty much everywhere across the globe to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot more firms are looking for that diverse talent. They want people from different backgrounds and different experiences, and they want to make sure that, they have that different perspective at that firm. So I think that that's something very important that's going on in the legal industry, and, you should take advantage of that. If you see a program that you like, or something, that speaks to you, pursue it, and they want you to be who you are. They don't want you to change who you are and be someone else. They appreciate you for who you are. And I think that that's something that is being appreciated, especially in law, where it's predominantly a white male profession, to be able to see people who look like you and be able to connect with those people and see how their experience has been. I think that's something that's been very valuable. And I've been getting a lot of, trying to think, support in terms of, these firms and, attorneys of color. They've definitely been very supportive of my journey, and anything that I need, I always know that I can reach out, and I feel supported.
I think Jack will probably have a take on this too, but when you work for someone in elected office, just know your name's not on the door. That's the most important thing to remember. You can agree with them 100% of the time. You can agree with them 85% of the time. They're in the office, and your job's to do work for them. They'll always welcome input, but just know that the decision is the person that was elected into office, not yourself.
Yeah, actually, we'll comment on that. Given I work for the Attorney General's office, like, and this was the same at the DOJ, depending on what division you're in, like the actual political impact may not be that big. Like, unless it is somewhat of a contentious area, like you're going to be what they call a line lawyer, at least at the beginning of your career. Like, you're not going to be reporting to political people. Your main job is going to be just enforcing the law as it is. Now, in certain divisions, maybe there's a little more political impact and like a prioritization, but for the most part, you will be kind of removed from that. And so, like, at my position, like, I shouldn't, like, the administration will change in 2 years. Like, I shouldn't have to worry about that. But the people, like, at the top of my overall division, they might have to worry about it because they're the political appointees. But for the most part, you're pretty insulated from at least some of that. Obviously, that depends a little bit on your division, but for the most part, you're just there for the law.
Okay, great, thank you. What are some key skills or abilities that you have found particularly helpful in your position? And what do you suggest that firm students can do now to help those particular skills?
Read more. Everything, you have to read it, digest it. I didn't read enough in college. I should have read more. Read more, get fast at it, get good at it.
I'd say networking, and I think Rob touched on that already, but I think networking and talking with people and understanding what issues are happening in a community and where people are working really introduced me to career paths I didn't know existed, and career titles I didn't know I may be interested in. And then networking is how I found the last 2 jobs that I was able to get. And so really that came down to who I knew. And I know Furman students are good. I get hits all the time on my LinkedIn from current students, so stalk away. I'm not ever weirded out by that. And reach out to either your firm and network or people that you intern with in the community and get to know, because that's how you find out some of the best opportunities. And being able to hold a conversation or a cold call or cold email to someone just to get to know what they do is a skill that I developed through the Riley Institute and some of the programs I was involved with. And that served me really well in the professional setting of just being able to cold email or cold call someone, really actively listen and be curious about what they do, how they got there, and seeing if they might have an opportunity that they can connect you to. I think that networking piece is such a skill. And the stigma that Gen Z doesn't know how to communicate, I think is ridiculous, because y'all communicate in so many different ways. So networking is just one of those ways to communicate. And there's lots of, whether you do that virtually only or on Zoom or in person for coffee, that's such a big part of relationship building. And that is literally what I get paid to do now. So you can make a career out of it. Who knew?
Yeah, I mean, in law, like read, write, and network are like the three biggest pieces of advice. And I would say, like with the writing, like actually try. Like I was totally a victim of this at Firmer, where I would kind of like write something that I knew was good enough to get a good grade, but wasn't always my best foot forward. That doesn't really cut it in law school. Like you need to be able to be intentional about what you're writing and really pay attention to your, even stylistically, like making it concise, like actually making sure the content is there and well organized. Like you actually try. And then as far as networking, like everything that Emily said, don't be afraid to reach out. Like worst case scenario, somebody doesn't respond, whatever. It's not, that's not a big deal, but reach out and ask questions, because you'll often find that they will say something that, you didn't expect, or you'll learn something, or they can even connect you with somebody that maybe knows more on a particular subject or niche, like area of the law or whatever field you're in. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to people. It's everybody's been there, everybody's had to do it. So don't be too nervous or anxious about doing that.
My comment would be on time management, just making sure that you have your day planned in a sense. If you know you have 5 or 6 things to do today, and 3 things to do tomorrow, and you have this due this day, this due this day, go ahead and set up those blocks of time for yourself so that you can know that you will finish and accomplish all the goals that you have. If you just go at it and you just take it day by day, I feel like it's very hard for you to be able, especially in law school, to be able to prioritize and get things done the way that you want to get things done and still have somewhat of a life. So just going ahead and learning those time management skills, figuring out what you need to do first. What's the higher priority? How many days will it take me to finish this? How long should I read? How long should I study? When should I eat? What time am I going to sleep? What time am I going to be at law school? You have to really think about those things and be intentional. And you have to think, if you rest now, you won't be able to rest later. The later you get up in the morning, later you're going to be reading at night. So just really think about those things and be intentional with your time.
Great, thank you. I think this is a big one. Were there any particular challenges or obstacles that you guys faced as you moved along beyond Vermin? Anything that of note for you?
Oof, yeah, I think it's more era specific, but maybe don't graduate from your master's in the middle of a pandemic. The market, hard to predict, obviously, but I graduated with my master's in education policy in June of 2020 in DC, when we were shut down to an extent that is hard to believe if you were in South Carolina during that time. And it was very uncertain, and the education policy jobs that I was looking for were frozen. People were unsure about budgets. So not to scare anyone, and that probably won't be you, but just being able to pivot and adapt, that was a huge challenge for me, because I had the degrees, I had done everything right. I had a lot of paperwork to show what I was good at, right? And I still couldn't land jobs or interviews. And that was kind of an unsettling time. And so I fell back and did another pivot, and I ended up substitute teaching for a semester at a private school here in South Carolina. And then I worked at a wine bar for a couple of months with all these fancy degrees, with Furman, with Georgetown, and these brand names. I still wasn't landing the jobs. And so I think being nimble enough to make those pivots and make things work And for a while, I'll be honest, I was embarrassed about having to do those short-term jobs and embarrassed about working in the food industry, but that gave me so many transferable skills. And now I tell everyone, and for a period of time, those were not on my resume, but now they are, because I think that gave me incredible real life experience. It afforded me the ability to job search and pay my rent at the same time. And that was kind of a tough year for me, honestly, but it ended up, again, I had the first job out of that pandemic was based on who I knew, and a mentor knew that I had come back to Greenville, said, I have this job in Spartanburg. Would you ever consider that? And I said, immediately, no. Because my plan was to go back to DC, but it was because of who I knew, who took a chance and said, I think this is a good fit for you. And I had been so rigid before about only living and working in DC that I ended up finding this position that was a great fit. And I had to just kind of recenter myself and decide to plant roots again here, and find the opportunities here. And I'm so glad I did. And eventually I may end up back in DC in a different job market, hopefully a different tax bracket. And we'll see, how that goes, but being able to work and pivot and realize where the opportunities are and kind of following that was a shift for me. And it was a challenge, but I got through it, and I'm really happy with where I ended up.
Don't go to law school during COVID if you can't avoid it. That was not a fun time at all. But also, like if anybody there decides to go to law school, like law school is a huge adjustment from Furman, especially like I'm sure Kwame can speak to 1 year. I've tried to block it out. It is extremely tough. It's taxing. It's a lot different way of being tested. You're graded on a scale. So it's not even necessarily how well you know your information. Like it partially is, but it's how well you know it compared to your classmates. And you're going to be with a lot of very, very smart people in law school. Like that, you're not going to really meet people in law school that don't deserve to be there. And so it's just, you really have to be able to put your head down and work longer hours and be willing to just more or less suck it up to get the grades that you want, because it's extremely competitive. But also just going into the job market, it's always an adjustment. For me, one of the bigger adjustments has been coming out of law school and bar prep is actually having like work-life balance for once. And so, there's always going to be challenges, but just make sure you have hobbies, make sure you have passions that you like to do outside of school. And like whatever you're doing now that you enjoy, like continue that. Like don't stop that just because you moved into the next stage of life. If it's something you enjoy and that brings you, a little relief or comfort, like keep that up, because there's a lot more to life than just work. And I think that's important to remember as you go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I quit a full-time job in Raleigh doing financial compliance work to come back and intern on the Hill to get my foot in the door. So don't be afraid to take that leap. And I was probably had made it to the final round of interview in 4 or 5 other offices before I finally got my job offer. So just be persistent and know that it will come. A lot of it just comes down to timing and luck. I mean, are you in the right place at the right time with the right people? And it all works out in the end. I was getting frustrated about to stop the search altogether and pivot to something else, and it all worked out. So just know that there is something that'll happen, and don't worry about putting yourself on a timeline. If you're persistent, it will happen for you.
I pretty much piggyback off what Robert said, and my advice would be: don't be complacent, don't get complacent. Go ahead and always have those goals for yourself. I feel like whenever I first left Furman, it was like a drop in terms of my overall morale, because it was like I was chasing this degree, I was chasing this job, I was chasing this. There were so many things that I wanted and I was striving for. And then when I finally got to that point where I felt like I had everything I wanted, the job, I had graduated, it was just like I just failed for a while. Like that first year, it was like a really depressing time for me, because it was just like, what am I supposed to do now? What is the next goal? What is my purpose? What am I chasing now? And I felt like whenever I applied to law school and I got back in, like Jackson said, it's very competitive, and I just got that high back. Like I got that drive, wanting to, live, wanting to do the best that I can. So just don't get complacent. Don't allow yourself to just be ordinary. Always have something you're striving for, always have something you're passionate about, because you don't want your life to be dull. And you're in college with all of your friends there, and then you go, and you're out on the real world, and everybody's gone. They're here, there, everywhere, and you're here by yourself. So definitely just have something that keeps you motivated, and just keep striving for something.
Thank you for that. This is more of a specific question. Deals more with career processes. What was your particular job search process like? What kind of challenges did you face in that process? And also, what advice can you give current Furman students about how to best navigate the journey after Furman?
I can start this. So this is just a little background. When you're in law school, big firms will hire. Basically, they'll do what they call, you'll get hired the summer after your 1L year. So like after your 1L summer, you get hired by these firms, and then the idea is you'll work after your 2L summer there, and then they'll hire you, give you a full-time offer for when you graduate and pass the bar. And so I went on that path and actually had an offer at a firm in Charlotte. And I realized during the summer that it was not something I wanted to do. And so this is a bit of unorthodox advice. And I ended up declining the offer, which like you don't really see. But I would say like don't be afraid to like be honest with yourself. And just because like this something is expected of you, or like this is the standard thing to do, if it's not what you want to do and you know you're not gonna be happy doing it, don't be afraid to not do it and look elsewhere. And like it takes a lot of guts sometimes, and obviously you gotta weigh a bunch of different things, but don't be afraid to be honest with yourself and follow with something that you want to do.
I guess I'll go next. I was in a unique position because I actually worked in the Malone Center. I was a student engagement ambassador and I worked under Steve Harrison while I was there. So I had access to the job websites. I saw every job that came in all across the country. I remember sometimes just spending hours scrolling through, like, what am I going to apply for? What do I want to do? What do I want to do? And whenever I finally decided that I didn't want to go to law school immediately, but I know I wanted to go in the future, I decided to start looking at jobs at firms. And then the biggest piece of advice I have with that, like you guys said, is just networking. So I did some research basically into our alumni network. And I happened to come across one of our board of trustees members, Yondalela Neely Holston, and she was very helpful. And she's actually the diversity inclusion managing partner for Kilpatrick Townsend. And she was that connection that I made. I cold called her. I sent her my resume. I sent her a statement saying, I'm just trying to get my foot in the door. These are my skills. This is my resume. This is what I want to do. And these are my plans. And within 2 or 3 days, she responded, and we sat down, we had a virtual meeting, we talked everything out, and she basically told me to apply and just see what happens. And I ended up with my first job, and that's how it happened.
Yeah. So like I said, I mean, I quit a job, came to the Hill, had called people that I'd met when I had interned the previous summer and talked to them, found an internship that was open late, and did it. My advice is if you want to work on the Hill, you want to get Hill adjacent, you want to be in DC, first thing you should do is just apply for a summer internship. If you're about to graduate, go ahead, apply today. People are going to love it that you're in. You don't need a federal resume to work on the Hill. They want a resume like you're applying to go work a job in corporate America. And just network. I mean, again, worst case, people say no, you're in the same position you're in. But I've had instances where when I was the intern coordinator interviewing for interns, they might not have been a fit for our office, or there might have been someone else that we picked, but the resumes get shuffled around. There's always a need for more interns. And if you apply and get your resume in front of people, apply to committees, members in South Carolina, members outside of South Carolina. I mean, people intern from Alaska for a Alabama member. It's not, anyone will take you. Committees have majority and minority internship programs. That's my advice. Just get an internship on the Hill, get your foot in the door, and network, grab coffees, meet people, and you'll find a spot without a doubt.
All of that's super helpful. I remember in my search during the last semester of grad school and summer after, I was on LinkedIn every single day. I set notifications for keywords for types of jobs, literally anywhere in the country. At one point, I'm just like anywhere that will take me. But I did set some parameters eventually for like Atlanta, Greenville, or DC. Those are the 3 cities I would live in, and would get alerts all the time. Look to see if it was a good fit. Is the salary where I need it to be? And then I would open that organization and see if there's anyone in that organization from Furman or Georgetown that I could connect with. In a year of my weird underemployment, unemployment phase, I applied to over 60 jobs before I landed in the one that was basically only because I knew someone. So I think I at one point chose quality over quantity. I had other classmates in the same position with great degrees trying to navigate the DC pandemic job market, who only focused on quantity. I'm going to do 10 a day. And they had so many, and we kind of ended up in the same place. So I chose quality of just the jobs with the, titles that I wanted, or the type of scope of work and organization that I wanted. And other classmates just threw applications out to see what fit, and it worked for them. So there's no best way to do it. I can't tell you there's one way or the other. But I will say, for me, it came down to that relationship building to get my foot in the door at United Way of the Piedmont and Spartanburg. And because that's a small network, there's only 16 United Ways in the state. And I was the only one doing public policy work. I'm still the only one doing public policy work, but how I got to Greenville is I was poached, which is like the official term. Someone saw what I was doing. Greenville wanted to start a policy program, and they offered me more money to do the same job. I said, absolutely. So that's how it worked for me that second time. And it's because of the relationships that I built working in partnership across the United Way network, getting my name out there, doing a lot of work for our coalition. And because I was the only one, I think I kind of had a target. A lot of people were kind of feeling out, if they were to start policy, what would it look like? And so when you're able to build those relationships, it's easier to find your way into opportunities that are otherwise not posted. And I'll be honest, the position legally had to be posted. We've got lawyers on the call, I should be careful. The position was posted, but it was already mine. Right. And so I feel weird saying that, but it is how relationships work, especially in corporate structures. United Way is a nonprofit, but it's also very corporate. And it's really based on who you know. So legally, they have to post the application, but they already knew what the decision was before I went into that process. So now that makes me think about all these applications I sent out while I was in DC. Is that what happened? Did they already have people in mind? So sometimes that's the reality, but I really think getting yourself out there, keeping track, and you just have to decide the quantity versus quality, and think about who you know who's already in that door that can open that door for you.
Well, I also just wanted to add something short. Also, don't forget fellowships. I think that was something that I didn't think about while I was, whenever I first graduated. I was like, okay, I'm going to get a job, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to work until law school. But we have some amazing fellowship programs. There's congressional fellowships, there's all kinds of fellowships to schools and different things that you can do that'll just bolster your resume. So if you do decide you want to work 2 or 3 years later, or you do decide you want to go to school, that's going to look so much better on your resume than you just, having a basic job. So getting that fellowship program, getting that extra education, or getting that name on your resume, I think that's something valuable that you can do as well, instead of just working a 9 to 5.
Okay. We're past the 6 p.m. mark. Kind of want to shift my attention now to the students. Really just have you guys have an opportunity to ask some questions about what you're thinking about for families. You kind of reserve the rest of the time here to have that student perspective for Q&A. So please don't be shy, because you guys are making material for it's gonna come. So but yeah. And two, if you have a specific question for a particular panel, you can just say the name.
Okay. I'll try to talk loud. I see the comment that we need to maybe repeat. So if you can't hear us, be like, you can't hear me. So I'm Caroline. I'm a senior. There's a lot of seniors in here. Probably a lot of senioritis, second semester senior feelings. And something you don't think about till you're here is like your exit strategy. Like what happens on May 5th? And I think something I've thought about, and you all have touched on this kind of the other presentation, but I'd be curious to hear about you elaborate on it more, is like, what are like the factors that also affected sort of your path right after graduation? Like, it's not just like, of course we have our hopes and dreams, but our lives are not just hopes and dreams. Like there's a lot of other factors, whether that be maybe you had family support, or you didn't have family support, or like were you in maybe some people might have had long-term relationships that they were having to negotiate, or like, so those sorts of life factors. It's like, do you want to move away from home? Do you move back home with your parents? Or move back home in general? So I'm just kind of curious how you all thought out these factors that we don't necessarily always talk about, in sort of determining like, what do you do when you graduate? Yeah.
I mean, for me, going straight to school, like money was a big factor to consider, and getting scholarship, because law school is expensive. I wasn't trying to accumulate crippling debt where I would then be pigeonholed into going into a certain career. Like, if I didn't want to do that just to pay off debt, probably that was the number one factor, to be honest, was making sure it was a decent school. So yeah, just making sure, finances, I would say, I mean, that's going to very much come down to the individual, and like, you're going to have to prioritize yourself. Like, what is most important? Like, is it important that you be home? Is it important that you move away? And also, like, if you're going for law, depending on the states, like, it may be beneficial to go to school in the state where you want to practice. Now, that's not universally true, but it can be helpful, particularly for networking to finding jobs afterwards. Like, I know in South Carolina, like, they hire a lot of people that go to South Carolina School of Law. So consider that as well, depending on what your career is.
I think a couple of people have said it, but don't graduate into COVID. Really not a great time to enter the job market. I cast a wide net, basically up and down the Southeast, just looking for a job to get my foot in the door and start making connections and see where I wanted to go. Do what I didn't do and try to get a 10-year plan. Like, where do you want to be in 10 years? Do you want to be back in Greenville? Do you want to be in Atlanta? Do you want to be in California? And what kind of job do you see yourself doing? Where do you see yourself working? And kind of work backwards from there. So start 10 years out and then work back. What gives you the best place to start at to get there? And it's okay to change your plan.
Yeah. For me, my exit strategy is where most of my friends were relatively close. My friend group ended up staying in Greenville or heading to Atlanta. So that was close enough to stick around. And I was so involved at that point in the grassroots community that it made sense for me to stick around in Greenville. Cost of living was a huge factor in staying in Greenville, at least to get started. And it was also a factor in me coming back in 2021 to job search after DC, because the cost of living was half of what I was paying to live in DC. So cost of living did make a difference. And I could offer like kind of the opposite to Jackson's approach, because I am in the industry I'm in because I believe in the work, right, of doing social justice work and making progress. But the other side, to be fully transparent, is I am in this industry for the student loan forgiveness, because I do have substantial debt from Furman and Georgetown and not have family help there. And I just thought loans were how we did it. I didn't think about debt. And now I am paying student loans for the first time in 4 years. $0 of my payment is going to the principal. So I am in the public service loan forgiveness program because I work for a nonprofit. I have 3 years in, 7 to go. I will continue to pay interest into the void for the next 7 years. But at the end of that, my substantial student loan debt is forgiven. That's my exit strategy, honestly, from the industry. But from Furman, the cost of living, where my friends are, and figuring out like student loans are something that I have to deal with. And so staying in that realm of possibility for now, for the next 7 years, is just my reality. And so that's kind of how I picked Greenville, because there's a great nonprofit community here. So not to be the downer, but just to offer that if that's for you.
And on student loans, the federal government, if you work for them, they have a repayment program too, where it doesn't come out of your pay. They'll start paying them off. Depends kind of what agency you work or what branch of government you work in, but they'll pay them back for you up to, I think, 60 grand or 80 grand in the house, and not deducted from your pay, but you're taxed on it.
Yeah, I piggyback a lot on what Jackson, Robert, and Emily would say. My thinking was, don't just think about where you want to work. Think about where you want to live. Think about what happens when you leave home from work and what your life is going to look like. Like, you don't want to be a person whose all your family and friends are in Texas and you're in New York just because you wanted that nice financial industry job. Because you have to think about what's going to happen whenever I get home from work. Who's going to be there for me? Who can I call on? Can I just go and see my friends one weekend? You have to think about those real life things that are going to impact you and your morale as well, because your life isn't just your work. It's more than that. And for me, I wanted to be close to family. And I know I wanted a job that paid well because I have student loans like everybody else. So that definitely played a big factor in me determining to go to Wake, because that was the school I knew I wanted to work in North Carolina. I really didn't see too many firms in South Carolina that I thought were of interest to me. And I knew Charlotte was an up and coming city with a lot of, jobs in the legal industry. So to me, whenever I was thinking of law schools, I knew I was either going to do Duke, UNC, or it was going to be Wake Forest. And I chose Wake Forest because it was just the best for me financially. And I'm happy with my decision. And I know when I graduate, I'll still be close to my family. I will have attended a great school and I'll have a great job. So it's worth it.
Well, yeah, I have a question. I don't know if you can hear me. Well, I'm a freshman. I just declared for politics. And my question would be, what would you say to freshmen and sophomore about those kind of harsh, I wouldn't call it harsh truths, but about those kind of thresholds you have upon yourself? Like one of you have said that while you're working in government in the office for someone, you're working for them, you are not making law. And that might be true at the start of your career. So what would be those kind of limitations or things that you have to, that sometimes are conflicted within yourself and your dreams and your goals and your political goals? If that is, so what would be those kind of, those harsh things that you have to accept, at least at the beginning? What would you say would be that?
And I can speak to that from a legal perspective. Like in law, like, and you get this drilled into you throughout law school, like your responsibility as a lawyer is to your client. And now you're not always going to agree with what your client does. And so you kind of have to just either come to terms with and accept that, like, not everything your client does, you're going to necessarily agree with or want to do. And sometimes it could just be, frankly, in direct opposition to your advice to them. But so you kind of have to know what your role is. Like law is you are a like client service like industry in a lot of ways. So like you don't necessarily have that autonomy to make these huge decisions for your client if your client is opposed to that. And that's just, you have to kind of be just honest with yourself about like the profession and like what you're going into. And that touches every single area of law, whether it's corporate, whether it's even down to like public defense. So you just need to be honest with yourself that like that is going to, like, that's going to come up. You're probably going to have to do something in your career that you disagree with, but you have to maintain that like this isn't necessarily reflective of you. Like it is your job. Like, and you will be doing a disservice to your client if you're not, acting on their behalf, because that is what they pay you potentially a large sum of money to do. And so you just need to be really honest with yourself that you're going to encounter that. And plus, like early on in your career, like as a lawyer, you're not necessarily choosing your clients. You kind of take what's coming to you. And like when you get more senior, you can develop a more niche practice. But like early on, like you're the bottom, you're the lowest common denominator. Like you have to do what comes your way and really just also try to take the experience out of it. Like in every way that you can, like, yeah, like, sure, I disagree with this, but this is a learning experience with dealing with a difficult client, or this is a learning experience and just like whatever particular task you're doing. So you have to be honest with yourself and kind of realize like the position that you're in the broader market.
At the end of the day, unless you own your own business, you're going to be working for someone and representing their interests. So I don't think it's difficult. Sometimes things can be contentious and you can disagree, but you agree to disagree and there's always a different perspective on the issue and you might have left something out. I mean, if you think of it like you're taking a test in the poli-sci department and you're doing an essay response, two people can have totally different answers, but they both get 100% credit on the question. It's just a judgment call at the end of the day for a lot of people. And if you're not the CEO or the elected official, you put people you trust to work under you to give you the best advice possible, but you make the decision with what you're advised with.
I don't know if you want the nonprofit perspective, but I was just surprised at how slow things move. I think when you're young and fresh and learning about change, it seems like social change happens really quickly. And in grassroots organizing, sometimes it does, but how many steps I have to go through up the hierarchy in a nonprofit to then go to my boss and the CEO, and the board has to approve what we do. And the board may not believe in some of the things that I wanted to work on that I believe is best for the organization. And we have a lot of dynamics to balance there. So I think just how slow progress can move was a little bit surprising to me, and different sometimes than how you learn about it in a textbook.
I would say, being a more recent graduate from college, just life hitting you all at one time. Like, you're not inside of the Furman bubble anymore. You're paying your own rent. You're paying your car insurance. You have to buy groceries. You have all these obligations of an adult. And now you have to figure out, how am I going to handle all of these? And then you get a job, and then maybe, you get a job that doesn't necessarily pay you what you feel like you deserve, but you've got to realize, like, this is where you start off at. This is just the beginning, and you have to make a lot of tough decisions and sacrifices and be, smart with your money. I'd say take a personal finance class. I know the school offers that your senior year. If you have that option, just take that class and just listen to what they have to say about budgeting, planning, credit, debit, how all those things work, just so whenever you get in the real world, you'll be ready for it, because it's hard out here and it's expensive to live. So just be prepared for that.
I have a question for Rob. Rob, we usually have a lot of students that want to go to the Washington, D.C. area after they graduate and work in that area. And you mentioned that you went and got an internship there. I'm just curious, do you have resources that you recommend that our students utilize if they want to find an internship in the Washington, D.C. area, or want to find a job? I know that Washington, D.C. has boards that are specifically for opportunities in that area.
Yeah, I used the Brad Travers board. I think it's bradtravers.com. That usually is the best postings on Hill, off Hill, advocacy. There's a couple other boards similar. That's the one I used. Happy, Jarrett has my phone number and email. If anyone wants to intern in the house, happy to connect you to kind of the internal boards, or to people either side of the aisle, either myself or someone else. And usually just networking with people is the best way to get your foot in the door if you want to work on Capitol Hill. As far as off the Hill, the boards, and again, networking, my job is to work for the Congresswoman, but also all day, every day, I'm meeting with people like Emily coming in, having their week on the Hill, advocating for what they care about. So it's another great way to make those connections. I know people every day that are leaving the Hill to go work for advocacy organizations, people coming back. I know a communications director who's a biology major and did cancer research out of college for 2 years. So there's no right way to get to DC if you want to do it. And everyone in DC, for the most part, is helpful and friendly and want to see other people succeed. Yeah, and Furman is a huge network on and off the Hill. People are always surprised. When I got up here, I didn't think anyone knew where Furman was, and everyone knows Furman and knows at least 3 people from Furman. So it's a great network. Definitely tap into it.
I'd just echo that from my time in DC, that I'd see people on the metro that, it's a Furman thing, right? So you kind of who that person is. You're not friends with them, but they went to Furman. That has happened to me so many times in DC, randomly, like on the metro, you just like do the little nod or like go dance, and that's the interaction, or you like delve into what they're doing. So DC is such a catch basin for Furman students. I think that's great. And when I was job searching for nonprofits in DC, there's one group called the Ford Agency, and there's a Ford modeling agency, which is not what I'm talking about, but the Ford Agency is a great space. They do focus mostly on women in the search process, but they're open to everybody. And they have great nonprofit jobs, as well as the Tom Minatos job board is one that I used, which is kind of Hill adjacent jobs in DC, in addition to the one that Rob mentioned. So we can get those links to Jarrett and he can send them out if you're interested.
Well, I think that's it. We'll call it short. I think we got eight minutes left here, but if there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap it up there. One thing I just want to reiterate too is, these connections don't stop here, these relationships. So, I think I speak on behalf of all those panelists when I say that they're always open to talking more to all of you about their experiences, what they're currently doing. So, use them. So thank you to the panelists for being here today.